Our preaching passage this morning is from the book of Romans. This is chapter 13, verses 11 through 14. And do this, understanding the present time, the hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber, because our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. The night is nearly over, the day is almost here. So let us put aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. Let us behave decently as in the daytime, not in carousing and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and debauchery, not in dissension and jealousy. Rather, clothe yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ, and do not think about how to gratify the desires of the flesh. Our message today is entitled Hope, and that is generally what we signify as the first candle, meaning hope, and we're going to do a series that goes around those 4 candles. So confession, I'm into satisfying desires of the flesh. I know. It's awful. I can't help myself. You know, when I get home, I find my way to my chair and I kick my feet up, and the next thing you know, whatever ball game I was planning to watch is over. And I have to look up the score on the internet because I missed the whole thing. Yeah. Sitting there in my chair. I also happen to be married to an amazing cook. And we had our second Thanksgiving yesterday because our first Thanksgiving was at our daughter's and there's no leftovers. I gotta have leftovers, you know? I'm talking about that thick turkey sandwich that you have at the end of the day. Rhonda makes this amazing, she calls it turkey hash, and I just can't miss out on that stuff, you know, because, I like satisfying the desires of the flesh, unfortunately. Now, Christmas offers many opportunities to satisfy the desires of the flesh. And now I'm thinking about cookies. My thoughts go to food a lot. I have to confess that. Thinking about Christmas cookies that we grow up with in our house. Lots of different ones. My mom used to take her roaster, and she would fill that roaster to the top with all different kinds of cookies in there. And she would put the lid on the roaster, and then she would set it someplace where you had to walk past it multiple times a day. I don't know how that happened, but I always seemed to be walking past that roaster, actually no matter where it's at, and you'd have to lift the lid and go, ooh, yeah, what am I going to have now? And gifts. I was raised with a gift-giving culture. All these gifts that, and I still have that kind of ingrained in me, you know. I give gifts for birthdays and gifts for Christmas and gifts to all different extended family, and we just always gave gifts. My mom was, her mom and dad were divorced when she was 10 years old. So this would have been 1942 or 3. That wasn't as common then as it is now. And her father lived in Arizona, her mother lived in Indiana, and she would travel back and forth once in a while in order to be with her mom or dad. She was determined that wasn't going to happen in our household. And so she created all these different traditions, that she was, gift giving was one of them. Now, we didn't just give gifts that were bought, although we did do that. We also had to have one homemade gift. Yep, that was a requirement. We could go spend our money if we wanted to, but always, and a lot of times when we were kids, that was the only gift that we gave, to mom and dad or whoever was the picture that we painted or whatever we were doing. One homemade gift. I like getting gifts. It's pretty fun, We had big dinners that we would do for Christmas, and those were always a joy as well. And I'm going to do one here, a little bit of one anyway, a Christmas dinner. So be sure and come to that. Our gift-giving ethic has stuck with me over the years, and it was so important that that the gifts and the family time and all of these things occurred, that some years I would literally go into debt in order to give the gifts that I wanted to give. Not always a good thing. I remember when I was 11 years old, maybe 12 years old, this whole gift-giving thing, I started wondering about it. And I wasn't sure, that we were really honoring the tradition of Christmas. And so I asked my mom, could I please read the Christmas story on Christmas morning before we opened the gifts? Well, sure, yeah, that would be great. Now, I have no idea how this happened, but when I went to the Bible that I really wasn't all that familiar with and opened it up, there I was staring at Luke 2 and the Christmas story. And so I read it, and we did our normal big Christmas exchange. Listen to Luke 14. This is Luke 14, 12 through 14. Then Jesus said to his host, "When you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." Isn't that an interesting message? I kind of comes down to when you give to those who can't give back. It kind of blows this whole theory of a gift exchange, right? Everybody spends $10 and we give a gift exchange because we have received in kind. Jesus says, not supposed to do it that way. You think giving to those we love is wrong? I talked about tithing one time in a Bible study, and one woman raised her hand and said, "I give my tithe to my children." That's an interesting concept. Not sure that's the way it's supposed to work. Is it wrong to give to those we love? Yeah, I don't think so. Even though they can give back, somehow I got to believe that's okay. It's not the actions so much that God judges us on, it's the condition of our hearts. In fact, that's specifically what the Bible said. It's the condition of our hearts. So, If you have the heart of a giver, that's what God wants to see. It means we are going to probably be giving to some people who can't give back as well as to people who can give back. But it's the heart of the giver. That means, do you need anything in return? Would it change your gift-giving habits if you knew you weren't going to get a gift back? See where I'm going with that? My guess is for most of you, it wouldn't change what you did at all if you didn't get a gift back. In fact, for some of you, it's probably very hard to receive gifts, just like it's really hard to receive compliments. You're not sure what to do with that. Kind of hard. This is a giving church. You give money to many different causes each year, and each month you're intentional about that, and you spread around the love by allowing each person to choose where that giving goes. That's a beautiful thing. That's something to celebrate in this congregation. But it's not just the money or the things that we give that's important. In fact, the best gift that we can give is ourselves. It's the very best gift. We think so much about giving presents with an ENTS on the end. I want you to think about giving presents with an ENCE on the end. It is our presence and not our presence that is really important. It's what people really want, and it's what people really need. They need us. They need connection. They need relationship. They need Christ in the flesh, and that's who we have the opportunity to be every single day of our lives. I have led a lot of mission trips in my ministry, and many times we took missions down to the Gulf Coast after hurricanes. Rita and Katrina, I took half a dozen or more trips down there. And people were confused about why they were there. And I always had to remind them of the reason they're there, you know. They think they're there to rebuild a house, you know, to clean up a yard, to provide this physical labor down there, and maybe some money for materials as well. They think that's why they're there. And I said, no, that's just an excuse for us to build relationships with the people that are hurting. Take time, have coffee with them, learn the names of their children, you know, get to know them. One of the things I always took prayer shawls with me. I would anoint them with oil for healing. We would pray with them. We weren't there just to rebuild a house. We were there to build a relationship. And Rhonda has still communicates with some of those people that we went down to serve. It's ourselves. That's the most important gift that we can give. Our presence, not our presence. This is Isaiah 61. The year of the Lord's favor. The Spirit of the sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. That's what people really need from them, us, to be there for them, to provide a very different kind of gift for Christmas this year. Your presence builds hope. And presents, The ones you unwrap, not always. One time at Thanksgiving, our son Richard and his wife Amy and daughter Liza decided to drive to Indiana to spend Thanksgiving with Rhonda and I. We were still living in Indiana at the time. And they were a little sneaky, you know. They were giving us progress reports as they crossed the country. Well, they started, you know, being a little creative about where they were so that they showed up earlier than we expected them. In fact, they walked through the doors on Sunday morning in the middle of the message that I was giving that morning, walked in and sat down at the pews, and we were all, oh, you know, we hadn't expected them yet. So Rhonda's teasing Richard, and she says to him, "Where's my present?" And Richard replied, "I am your present." Costs a lot of money to drive to Indiana, you know. And that was sufficient that they were there, and you know what? It was the best gift we could have gotten. Speaking of best gifts, I want to finish by reading this story. It's called The Goodest Gift. And it was written by by Jenna Day. It was written by Jenna Day. Every December, as I take out the Christmas decorations, I also take out the memory of a Christmas 20 years ago in a small town in central Maine, and the gift that one little girl gave to another. In a world where Christmas is even more glittery and commercialized, it reminds me that the true spirit of the season lies in giving and receiving from the heart. Winters seemed to be colder back then, and school days dragged slowly by. At my small school, we had 2 classes for each grade. My class was for the children who got good grades. Most of us wore nice clothes, and our parents were in the PTA. Those in the slower class didn't get good report cards. Most of the kids were poor. We attended the same school year after year, and by 4th grade, we all knew who belonged in which class. The one exception was the girl I shall call Marlene Crocker. I still remember the day when Marlene was transferred to the smarter class. She stood by the teacher's desk that morning in a wool skirt that hung down below her knees. Her sweater was patched, but her face was wide and hopeful. She was not at all pretty except for her intelligent-looking brown eyes. I had heard Marlene was a good student, though, and I wondered why she hadn't been in the smarter class all along. As she stood waiting for the teacher to assign her a seat, for a moment I imagined that I might become her friend and we would talk together at recess. And then the whispers began. "She's not sitting beside me," someone sneered. "That will be enough," the teacher said firmly, and the class turned silent. No one would laugh at Marlene again, at least not when the teacher was in the room. Marlene and I never talked together at recess, as I'd first imagined. The boundaries that separated us were too firmly drawn. One late autumn day, Mom and I happened to be out driving along a wooded back road. It was one that we seldom took because Mom said it wasted gas. I was busy chattering away when suddenly out the window I saw a tar paper shack so tiny that it would have fit inside our bathroom. The shack was set far back in a big field littered with rusted car parts. Across the yard stretched a long clothesline, and beneath which stood a little girl who looked at us as we sped past. It was Marlene. I raised my hand to wave, but our car had already passed her. That poor little girl, my mother said, hanging out clothes, and it's about to rain. Once the snow came that winter, it seemed as though it would never stop. As Christmas drew near, my spirits were as high as the snowdrifts as I watched the pile of presents grow beneath our Christmas tree. At school, a few days before our school Christmas party, we passed around a hat in class to pick the name of a classmate for whom we'd buy a gift. The hat went around, and the names were drawn. And finally, the hat came to Marlene. One boy leaned forward closer than anyone had ever been to Marlene and hooted as he read her slip of paper. Marlene got Jenna's name. I began to flush furiously as I heard my name. Marlene looked down at her desk, but the teasing went on until our teacher stopped it. I don't care, I vowed haughtily, but I felt cheated. The day of the party, I marched to the bus reluctantly, carrying a nice gift of magic markers for the person whose name I had drawn. At school, we ate the Christmas cookies our mothers had baked and drank our grape drink. And then the presents were handed out, and the wrapping paper went flying as everyone tore into them. The moment I had been dreading had arrived. Suddenly it seemed as though everyone was crowding around. Sitting on my desk was a small package wrapped neatly in tissue paper. I looked over at Marlene. She was sitting alone, suddenly overcome by the need to protect Marlene from the mocking of my classmates. I seized Marlene's gift, unwrapped it, and sat there holding it, hidden in my hands. What is it? A boy hollered when he could stand it no longer. It's a wallet, I finally answered. The bell rang, and the buses came, and someone said to Marlene, did your old man make it from the deer he shot? And Marlene nodded and said, and my ma. Thank you, Marlene, I said. You're welcome, she said. And we smiled at each other. Marlene was not my friend, but I never teased her. And maybe when I got bigger, I would ride my bike over there and we could play and talk. I thought about that as I rode the bus home. I tried not to think of what Marlene's Christmas would be like. Years went by. I went on to high school and college and lost contact with most of my childhood schoolmates. Whenever I struggled with math problems, I recalled the way Marlene had always breezed through hers. I heard rumors that Marlene had dropped out of school to help her mother with the younger children at home. And then I heard that she had married young and started having babies of her own. One day I came across the white doe-skin wallet that I had received at that Christmas party long ago. Funny how, of all the gifts, I'd kept this one through the years. I took it out and studied its intricate craftsmanship. Beneath the top flap, I noticed a small slit holding a tiny piece of paper that I had never seen before. Sitting in my comfortable home, I read the words that Marlene had written to me years before. To my best friend, they said. Those words pierced my heart. I wished I could go back to have the courage to be the kind of friend I'd wanted to be. Belatedly, I understood the love that had been wrapped inside that gift. There are few things that I unpack every year at Christmas time. An old wooden crutch, shiny balls for the tree, and a Santa figurine. And I take the wallet out too. Last year, I told my small son the story of the girl who had given it to me. He thought about it, and then he said, of all the gifts, that was the goodest gift, wasn't it? And I smiled, grateful for the wisdom that let him see that it was. It is us that people need, us. More than anything that we have to give them, they need us. God bless.